Let's do another episode here of Guys on the Go. All the sports talk you need in less than 40 minutes. Guys on the Go happens every week thanks to our great partners like Mohawk Honda. 2022 is here. New selection, new vehicles, new year, new ride, new you. All that stuff's happening right now in Glenville, New York. Stop in and say hello to our great people from Greg Johnson, Cam McKenna, Brian McKenna, Hot Sauce Jake Toy. You know the list of people, Lindsay Herndon and more. You know the names. We've been telling you about it all the time. Now it's your opportunity to work with these people and get yourself into a new vehicle. Do what I'm doing in 2022, riding around the capital region in a new Pilot. I found the vehicle that fit my budget, my lifestyle, and more. You can do the same for yourself. By the way, next Thursday, Levac and Gaz will be broadcasting live from Mohawk Honda, so check out GodzillaMedia.com for the info for that show and how you can stop in and watch the show and hopefully drive off the lot with a new ride. It is Mohawk Honda right there on Freeman's Bridge Road in Glenville, where they always go out of their way to please you. Now, on to this week's episode. All the sports talk you need from the week in a quick 40 minutes here on Guys on the Go. The college football playoff. You might be following Godzilla Media's stories this past fall to find out about the top 25 poll, how the Heisman Trophy went down. You've heard a lot of college football talk on this podcast before. And here we were, New Year's Eve. We had Michigan versus Georgia, David versus Goliath, and Alabama versus Cincinnati. And both games are blowouts. Both games weren't close. Both games were even arguably not entertaining. On New Year's Eve, where the ratings came out and they were lower than other years before, but I felt it this year. I'm home watching the games, hoping they're going to be classics, hoping they're going to have those plays we've hoped for, and we didn't get that again. We're basically a decade into this at this point of college football semifinal playoff games, and unfortunately for college football fans like you listening, for like myself, these games have never been close. On average, we're still at 3 touchdown difference between these teams in these playoffs, and the SEC is reign supreme. Hell, next year when we see the top 25 poll, what are we going to get, 7? 9 teams in the SEC that are scattered across the poll because of how much respect that conference gets, and they continue to do it. Rightfully so. The SEC year after year continues to put out the best product in college football. It's just different in the SEC when it comes to the quality of players and style and everything else. Now, the question for some who are not SEC fans, who might not look at this and say this is what they want as a college football fan, they're going to turn their eyes and attention towards what's the future of the sport? What should college football do differently now that the blowouts continue to happen? I would love an expansion. I would love for it to move to 8 teams or 16 teams. Hell, I'll do 32. D3's 32. But I know that's going to be taking a long time to have happen. So 16's good with me. Best 16 teams have it happen. If you want to tie in the conference championship games, great. So now you get 16 teams battling it out. You can cut a week or 2 off the season. Hell, you can even play it through. Right now, college football teams at the FBS level are making more money in those 4 years to 5 years than they've ever made in the history of that sport because of the NIL, which we're going to get to here in a few moments, involving a certain quote from a certain analyst. So if you're able to make more money in that 4-year window than you might even be able to make post-playing if you end up not being an NFL player and you get to profit off of that and have that money to start off your life, great. Wonderful. Expand it to 16 teams. I'm cool with the matchups. People are going to say it's going to dilute the regular season. That's not the case. You're going to have teams battling for those final spots and seedings and positionings. Has anyone looked at any other sport, the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and thought, you and all these playoff teams, it gives us no storylines at the end? Did you think Alabama wasn't going to make it? Did you think Georgia in the SEC title game wasn't going to get in if they won or lost? We don't really have those really important games, or we could add to the list if we had more games like that. So I'm cool with 16 teams. Because I want to see more matchups, more football, more games that matter, the playoffs there. Someone's going to look at me and listen to this and say, guys, why would they expand it if it's not competitive already? Why don't we just go back to the BCS? Why don't we just have SEC champion 1 versus the second best team in the SEC every year? Because they're the best teams. And once in a while, Clemson will get good again. Well, let's go back to the BCS. For those people rallying against the college football playoff and saying how awful it is and it's the worst and blah, blah, okay. If we had the old BCS system this year, do you know what the national championship game would have been? Alabama versus Michigan. It would have. Alabama was the number 1 seed. Michigan was the number 2 seed. Georgia wouldn't have had an opportunity to play in the game. Neither would Cincinnati. It wouldn't have been close. And let's go back to the BCS, right? Of those 16 games that were played in the BCS era from 1998 to 2014, careful with those years. Remember, there's some Januaries there if that's throwing you off. 10 of the 16 games were double-digit blowouts. On average, of that years from 1998 to 2014, the average margin of victory, 14 points. So this idea that even when it was team 1 versus team 2 in college football, they were close games, it's not true. Look at how high of a regard we hold games like Texas versus USC, that Vince Young game. Ohio State, Miami, the pass interference call. You can even look at games like the Florida State-Auburn championship, where it's a game-winning touchdown by Jameis Winston. Same with Deshaun Watson and Clemson. And basically the same thing with Auburn-Oregon, where Michael Dwyer falls on somebody and it's the weirdest finish to a championship. We remember those games because they're close, because there's not often times we get those games. So if college football wants to improve its product and have more money being made and more people care about the playoffs and see if there's more competition and storylines, the answer is expand. Not to 6, not to 8, to 16. More teams, I'm fine with it. The games, can I guarantee you they'll be more competitive? No. But at least I'll have more reasons to care about the games, because we're approaching that status as a diehard college football fan that I am. I'm getting to the point where it's like, it's going to be a blowout no matter what. 7 straight years of this, 8th year straight, every week. I tune in hoping to see the best teams in college football and the best players compete. And then all of a sudden I hit December 31st and January 1st, and I already know the 2 best teams, and we can just fast forward a week. Now let's stick with that college football theme here. You see the NCAA logo sitting there on our visual side. I want to hit on the Herb Street, Desmond Howard, David Pollock quote that went viral this past weekend. If you missed it, Kirk Herbstreit had said something along the lines of, the players now just don't love the game of football like they used to, in reference to bowl games, in reference to players sitting out, not wanting to play, not wanting to be a part of the game. This is also in reference to the Ohio State-Utah game, where 2 of the top Buckeye wide receivers didn't play in that game. It is so good that Twitter and social media actually came together, united in a force, to destroy a bad take. For context, those guys are sitting there, Pollock and Howard and Herbstreit and Reese Davis, in an empty Rose Bowl for the 2nd consecutive day of game day coverage, even though they're not on a campus. ESPN had to find any way to suck out that money, to make it happen. And by make it happen, I mean make those sponsors happy. Buy out that airtime. For those college football games that are maybe 3 hours, make it 4 hours. Extend those commercial breaks. Buy out the inventory and everything else. Stop it. For guys like Kirk Herbstreit and others, the tone deafness of the comments. When back when he played, there was about 18 bowl games. Now they've almost doubled in size to 36. The meaningful bowl games of 30 years ago, the meaning of them are not the same in 2021. That has nothing about how much you love football. If you're a Jalen Smith, a Jake Butt, you blow out your knee, you're going to ask those teams, well, I loved football. Do you mind if you still give me that money I should have gotten even though I played in the bowl game? And how about a poor kid like Marcus Lattimore from South Carolina? Those are real things that happen. Those guys are looking out to protect their futures. ESPN had every production of every bowl game except one this season. So you're telling me Herbstreit and Howard and Pollock and Davis are not invested by the success of those bowl games for their own personal benefit? Of course they are. I loved what some Twitter user said. Oh, if you love broadcasting so much like these players, why don't you do your job for free? Why don't you not get paid next year? So those people on Twitter actually made a point. So thank you, Twitter. Thank you, social media, for calling out these guys and trying to say as if the reason they're not playing in bowl games is because they don't love football as much anymore. They're protecting their future. They don't have to do what ESPN tells them to do anymore. They don't have to do it because it's the right thing. It's the accepted thing. They're looking out for themselves. Why is that a bad thing? I know some people can look at that and say you're not being a good teammate. You're not going to do the right. They're looking out for themselves, putting themselves in the best position for your future. And whether that is your broadcasting career, a business, and now an athlete, I've got no issues with that. And hopefully, that's the last time in 2022 and the last time for the future we're going to hear that old, washed up, tired take on a national stage. Since we're already talking about sports media and stories that have impacted this week in sports, another sports media one, I had to flip the order on this one a little bit, and that's fine. Now, if you're a baseball fan, we're not going to get a lot of baseball headlines for a few months. The labor talks have not budged, the free agent moves and everything. Nothing's really been going on in baseball except this. Ken Rosenthal, who you might know as that guy who wears the bow tie during the Fox games, no longer works for the Major League Baseball Network. And according to reports from ESPN, former Yankee beat writer, now New York Post media click guy, Andrew Marchand, who I'm here. Is he called Andrew Marchand? Has he changed his last name? Anyways, Andrew Marchand is reporting the reason why Ken Rosenthal lost his job at Major League Baseball Network is because Rob Manfred, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, personally wanted Ken Rosenthal out because of the criticism that Rosenthal had in The Athletic, another one of his employees, about the ways in which Rob Manfred was handling COVID situations and players in 2022. Well, it's 2020 when he wrote that article, and the issues happened in 2020. But Ken Rosenthal felt the impact in 2022. Now, let's sit on this for a little bit, because I'm actually fascinated by you listening if you care about how you consume your product. It's a big deal for me, somebody now who runs a non-traditional media company, and I would love feedback on this. Gaz at GazzillaMedia.com. TOMGO is easy on Twitter. However you want to reach out, please, I'd love to hear your take on this. Do people understand that in the late 2000s, places like the Major League Baseball Network, the NHL Network, NFL Network, you get all like the league pushed types of networks that bring you 24/7 content of your favorite sports are arms, extensions, partners of those leagues. So like you're not going to ever hear our guy Scott Hansen on NFL Red Zone talk about how bad concussions are for the sport. That's just never going to happen on the NFL Network because the NFL doesn't want that content out there. The NBA is never going to have a 30 for 30 on Kings Lakers and how they might have the Kings been robbed by Tim Donaghy on the NBA TV setting. No. And the same goes for the Major League Baseball Network. They don't want Major League Baseball Network employees bashing the product because they're running a business. Now, that sounds very simple for us to explain, and maybe I didn't even have to explain it. Maybe I did. But why I bring that up is this. When you become an employee, when you're Ken Rosenthal and you work for Major League Baseball Network, when you're Scott Hansen and you work for the NFL Network, you understand that journalism may not be the same way in which you practiced it before. When you're working for a company that their best interest is to protect the brand, we hear that term a lot, and you as an employee take a shot at that brand, they can be pissed. They can be angry. Another way to put it is, hey, you have a boss. You went out and publicly criticized your boss. Your boss can bring you down to the corner office and be pissed off about it. So, like, I wish it was such an easy thing to be like, Rob Manfred's the worst. He sucks. He's terrible. Okay. Like, he's had examples of why he's screwed up in baseball before. And I still think someone's really pissed at Rob Manfred because that story leaked out to Marchand. So somebody wanted him to find out how bad of a guy he was for doing this. We could argue back and forth about whether or not he should have lost his job because of that. I wish I could tell you that's as simple, cut, and dry, and easy as that. How dare Manfred step in and should be shamed and embarrassed. He's got to let Ken Rosenthal say whatever he wants on different platforms. He doesn't. Like, he really doesn't, though. I run a company now, and if I had a partner that I worked with, I would let my contributors know, hey, this is a business that we're promoting. Just be aware of that. This is like Radio Media 101. Now, I want to clarify something on that too, though. Just because you may have a partnership with a business does not always mean that you just can't talk about them. You can have civil conversations. You can have those things happen. And that's why I love Godzilla Media and independent media companies. This goes back to the days when Robert Kraft and that situation with the massage parlor was never mentioned on a certain Boston radio station because Robert Kraft owned the station. This is why Daniel Snyder in D.C. never got criticized. Because Daniel Snyder in D.C. owned the stations. Here in upstate New York, the Pagulas run WGR 550, the home for the Bills. They do games from a spot where the Pagulas own. I'm talking pregame and postgame. Midday shows. The Pagulas own the building. ESPN Syracuse is owned by Jim Boeheim. He is a part owner of the radio station. And now radio overall, I can talk about businesses that might buy airtime to promote their team and everything else. You see the canned interviews and the random spots for that. You get it. Now these places, whether it's radio stations, television stations, newspapers, and more, are going to always go to that team, that commitment, that business relationship and partner. And because of those relationships, you're not going to get the type of feedback, reaction, true, honest, authentic, raw reactions to your favorite teams anymore. Some of you do not care at all. If you're a Bills fan and someone's going to tell you how great the Bills are, you want to listen. If you're a Syracuse basketball fan, you want to hear how great the Orange are and the biggest recruits and this, you'll listen. If you want to be fed that propaganda of how great you are constantly, you can find the places to do that. Or as I like to say, if you want to turn on a cable news station and listen to someone agree with you for 3 hours, I know you can find the station. But that's the problem. Like, we have this new world in 2022 where you can actually independently go out and find people who have none of these ties that will tell you what they believe with none of this nonsense in the background. And Ken Rosenthal decided that's what I'm going to do. And he did it. And he faced the consequences because he worked for a traditional media company. So just keep that in mind. Maybe some of you have never thought of that before until now. Maybe you listening right now thought, guys, I'm going to continue to listen to what I want to listen to. I think people, for me, and I hope, that in 2022, the reason you're going to love Godzilla Media Podcast and this podcast and Levac and guys, you know them all, is that the people who work here are real and authentic and honest, and they give their opinion, have nobody in their back pocket, or they're in somebody's back pocket trying to tell you the ways in which they should think because they don't want to get a corner office call. That's the impact of Ken Rosenthal and Rob Manfred. It's a little microcosm of what's been going on in the media world the last 10 years, and hopefully is influencing change for the ways in which people consume products for the future. We go from consuming products to becoming content kings. What I mean by that is my guy Danny Parkins at 670 The Score in Chicago, as Adam Shine called him, the number one local radio host in the country. Well, Danny Parkins made headlines because of an interview he did with an NFL MVP voter. Does the name even matter? Like, generic old guy who's an NFL MVP voter who basically said he's not going to vote for Aaron Rodgers for the MVP because of he's a jerk, he's not helping his team. So that was the headline quote that got out there. I would highly recommend going and watching the clip for yourself. Because what does the internet classically do? Take the headlines. Some people have clearly not watched the clip because the writer walks through why he would not vote for Aaron Rodgers. He made a case for Cooper Kupp. He made a case for Jonathan Taylor. He made the case for Tom Brady. They had a civil conversation for that interview. But what people took out of it is that, oh my God, look at this. He's not voting for Rodgers. How unfair. Let us sit with the fact and believe this, that I cannot believe I'm doing this. I'm actually taking the writer's side. I'm not agreeing with the writer, but what the writer has the option to do, what the writer can do is this. Danny Parkins, the host, can ask the writer a question, and he can have an opinion. Hey, the reason I'm not going to vote for Aaron Rodgers is I feel like he hasn't been the biggest reason why the Packers have won. I feel like Jonathan Taylor has had a bigger impact for the team. Cooper Kupp is at an all-time great receiving record. Tom Brady has shown what he can do for the Tampa organization. If he can back up the reasons as to why and doesn't say vaccination, like Aaron Rodgers did in his post-game press conference today, during the week, then okay. Like, there are far worse voters than this MVP voter that has taken heat. He had an opinion. He backed it up. People didn't like it. That's the story. It's been a slow week. By the way, I'll tell you in sports, like, You're hearing a lot of media talk this week because it has not been an exciting week in sports, and there are a lot of stations that got to fill 4 or 5 hours, whether it's television, radio, podcast. That's why I would give it to you quick, because it's been one of the slower weeks we've had in 2022. I know it's the first week. We're like in the fast 8 months of sports talk. But they needed content. So the writer backed his stuff up. Now people want to send the hate mail. How could you? You hate Aaron Rodgers. By the way, you know that argument just solidifies Rodgers as the MVP. When people get so worked up about somebody with an MVP case and they don't listen to those players who, by the way, should all be in the discussion. Cooper Kupp, Jonathan Taylor, Tom Brady. I'm a little bit more biased for Brady because I just watched what he did for my team. So I would be cool with Brady winning the MVP. And I'd be cool with Cooper Kupp winning the MVP. Aaron Rodgers won it last season. Aaron Rodgers just won it last season. He's great. But I can't even argue against the writer's points that he has been a distraction in that team. That he has caused more negative than positive. Negative headlines and everything else. So, fine. If you want to evaluate it like that, you can. But look at other people like Major League Baseball Hall of Fame voters sending blank ballots. I'll take face the criticism. College football voters can vote in silence and secrecy or the Heisman Trophy. Same goes for the Basketball Hall of Fame. Trying to figure out who actually votes for the Basketball Hall of Fame. A secret mystery committee. So with this non-transparency that I complain about in sports about who's voting for who and why, this writer comes out and is transparent as to why he did it. We don't know who the hell didn't vote for Derek Jeter still for the Hall of Fame. We know that one guy that robbed Grom of the unanimous Cy Young Award. So this guy comes out as transparent and we disagree with him and he backs it up and we still want to argue with him. Okay, fine. Like, what do we want? Just everybody to agree with us, huh? Hey, that goes back to what we said before. If we want everybody to agree with us, can we all just agree that the playoffs are going to be great next week? I was so fired up. Like, if you told me, guys, you're going to come back for the first podcast of 2022, you're going to talk about the NFL Week 18 and the playoff scenarios and break them down. I don't need to do that because they're not as excited as I thought they'd be. I'm kind of bummed by it. I thought the math was going to add up. A lot of people who are NFL fans are not going to care about this week because the 1 o'clock games stink. I don't get the Saturday thing anymore. I just don't get it. Like, they don't need it. The NFL did not need the Saturday thing. They got the Sunday night game. Week 18 stinks. Like, if you're a Charger fan and you're a Raider fan, you're going to love Week 18. If you're jockeying for position in the playoffs, it's fine. I know the Niners and Saints are in a mix out there and everything. I'm not as thrilled for Week 18. It is very individual fan bases. And I'm a Bucs fan. Bucs are in. This would be the time for most of my career fandom that the Bucs would be out or fighting for a spot, but I'm not as thrilled for Week 18 as I thought anymore. Like, if you're a Titan fan and you lock up the top seed, great. Packer fans already got it. Niner fan, Colt fan, you guys got the season on the line. You know what you need to do. So, Aaron Rodgers stole all the headlines this week, and we're going to be talking way more NFL talk next week here on Guys on the Go. All right, you got me. We should talk about Antonio Brown, right? We should talk about that madman quit the Tampa Bay Buccaneers during the game. Now, just an hour before we started to tape here on Guys on the Go, the report started to come out from the NFL Network and others that Antonio Brown, and it really is from Antonio Brown, put out this long, lengthy statement about how he was injured and Bruce Arians forced him back into the game and he's got breaks across his ankles and everything. Okay. Could Antonio Brown be telling the truth? Yes, he could. But this is what happens when you start to build a career out of people not being able to trust the things that you say. Whether it goes back to the bizarre world that was the Raiders and the Patriots. Remember when his feet got frostbite because he didn't wear the slippers in the cryo chamber? Remember when he farted in that doctor's face? Look, I could make a list for the rest of the podcast of the bizarre, strange, weird, unbelievable things Antonio... Remember he had the blonde mustache? Anyways. So now, when you do things like that, and they seem incoherent and irrational and irresponsible, and then all of a sudden you have a 2-post wide praise of yourself and how it's not your fault and it's the Buccaneers. But it's hard for me to believe that. Could there be the element of truth somewhere in that story? Sure. Maybe. But for me to say, oh, well, Antonio Brown was hurt, that's the reason why. Do we not believe that exchange has ever happened before in the NFL? And I'm talking about the one Antonio Brown wrote that happened, the back and forth between him and Coach Bruce Arians about playing or not playing. He could have easily said, you know what, you are hurt, you're done for the game, you can't get back out there, and gave the throat/sign. And Antonio Brown could have misinterpreted him, misunderstood him. That's a very logical way to happen. Or Antonio Brown's lying. The whole quitting during the game thing is like something that's never happened before in sports. And I paused because I was at the Vontae Davis game for Buffalo, and he actually did the same thing. Antonio Brown, you know what? Yeah, I want to go here. I was thinking about saying Antonio Brown's the worst teammate since Terrell Owens. But how differently we viewed those two players. Terrell Owens and Antonio Brown. And if you remember T.O. is nowhere close to being as bad as Antonio Brown. T.O. was doing sit-ups, and T.O. was called the team obliterator by Skip Bayless and the Diva, the Ego, and everything else. There's been other guys like that, like Keyshawn Johnson for the Bucs. But the difference between T.O. and the difference between Keyshawn and Antonio Brown is that what's happened in 2022 is you get people like Sarah Spain, Jason Whitlock. It's amazing those two agreed on something. That nobody wants to criticize Antonio Brown. There is a group of people that no matter what Antonio Brown does, rips his shirt off, waves to the crowd, blonde mustache, whatever it is. And by the way, go back to listen to this Levac and Gaz episode. Levac's theory about him getting blasted by Vontez Burfict maybe makes more sense as to why Brown's changed as a person. No science behind it, but more people believe it. The problem is Antonio Brown, in similar fashion, I guess I'll call it like Kanye West, is that as wild as he acts, people will say, well, he probably needs help. He might have something wrong upstairs. He needs to go to therapy. It really frustrates me when people use that as a shield. People can just be idiots. People can just do really dumb shit. But the idea that they get a pass because, it could be mental health. Could be a problem. I don't want them to give that as an excuse because all of a sudden, I said this back to Simone Biles. Go back and listen to Simone Biles episode I had in July. What's happened here in 2021 and 2022 is that anytime something goes wrong or anytime something's uncomfortable, people can just scream out mental health, and it's like, you can't criticize now. Oh, okay, all right, get out. All right, the conversation's over. It's like the ultimate trump card. If you say that, then nobody can criticize you. We've never had this point yet in sports. We had it before where you had the Brandon Marshalls and Royce Whites of the world where people weren't quite sure of how to... Ron Artest is another one. They weren't quite sure how to handle athletes like that. And we went from over-the-top criticism of Artest and Royce White and Brandon Marshall to now the exact opposite of don't say anything about them until we know they get help. That's what frustrates me. Is that Antonio Brown can act like an idiot and people continue to give him chance after chance after chance. Antonio Brown can do what he wants, do it every single time, and people be like, well, he deserves a chance. He needs help. I'm cool with the Bucs being done with him. You can't quit the team. I know it sucks that Chris Godwin tore his ACL. I know Mike Evans is usually banged up. Gronk had a fine game. Fournette's hurt. Like all these injuries are probably going to pile up and cost Tampa the Super Bowl, which really sucks. But do not take him back. NFL teams, do not take him back. What more does this guy have to do to prove to you that he is the worst? A little late edition here on Guys on the Go because of Syracuse basketball. They were not originally set up for this taping because Syracuse is up by a huge margin against Miami, basically a 20-point lead against the Hurricanes on the road, and they lost. That was some of the worst basketball I can ever remember with that big of a lead for Syracuse in my lifetime. Syracuse had some bad games. Syracuse basketball, like any team over the last 30 years, has had bad games. They've had bad players. They've had bad performances, right? Like we've seen all those things. It doesn't matter what sport it is. You watch sports long enough, games like that happen. But to be on the road and blow a lead like that with the broadcasting crew on the television side, my God, Angel Gray should never. Just probably is a nice person. Done with play-by-play. You cannot put somebody out there who has never called play-by-play before in a national stage like that. It wasn't fair to her. Dan Bonner's been doing games for 30 years. You cannot put her out on that game. Go find a kid from Newhouse. Go find a kid from Miami. Call some Angel Gray, Gary. Does it even matter what her last name is? She butchered so many names and was so off during the broadcast. So you had that happening on the TV side. You had no defense, no production, another blown lead. Syracuse basketball, this team is pacing to be the worst Syracuse basketball team in my lifetime, too. 7-7. 7-7. They're horrendous. Everything from ball handling, getting the ball up and down the court to zone deep. Oh, my God. They're so bad. And I was so confident they'd be good. And next year they've got a top 10 recruiting class. I don't even know what that means anymore because of these transfers and who's in and who's out and how hard it is to follow college basketball. I can tell you this. Syracuse basketball is no longer good. And I know it. Somebody's smiling. Rolling on this tape, pausing it. I'm going to say, all right, guys, I'm going to roll this back to March. And how? Like, you can score 80 points. You got to play some defense. The zone defense is caught up to people. People can outshoot the zone now in 2022. Syracuse basketball is so bad. Terrible loss. Miami's not actually that bad of a team, but they're not making the tournament. They're so awful. So bad. Kind of cool what happened for the WWE this week. And the twist is that you wonder if these circumstances work in their favor. So many times over the last 10 years, you had CM Punk leaving the company. It was reported that because CM Punk left, that led to the Daniel Bryan Yes Mania Championship in New Orleans and all that stuff. So you had Becky Lynch years ago break her nose by Nia Jax, and that led to getting the Ronda Rousey, Charlotte Flair, Royal Rumble Mania stuff get pushed back because of her injury. It had turned out to be that first ever women's WrestleMania main event. Now you have something like that happening. Now, hopefully, he has a speedy recovery. That's Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns is out for the Day 1 pay-per-view, and because of that, Brock Lesnar in the Fatal 5-Way, he wins the title. So we're going to get Brock Lesnar versus Bobby Lashley. We could even see that at WrestleMania. We're likely going to get Roman Reigns versus somebody, the Royal Rumble champ, whoever that ends up being. Whoever wins the Rumble is going to get Roman. That's pretty good. Like, that's really good. And there's rumors out there that maybe that's going to be The Rock. Can you imagine if The Rock shows up as number 30? They put the men's Rumble at the end, and The Rock wins the Rumble, and you get Roman Reigns versus The Rock and Bobby Lashley versus Brock Lesnar on night 1 and night 2 of Mania. Woo! Here we go. Day 1 overall is a pay-per-view. The Usos match was really good. And we talked about it's going to be a big shift in the WWE. Not really. They had more video packages, more personality pushes. They used the term premier live event rather than pay-per-view. The changes really happened in NXT with Braun Breaker, who's really good. Really good. Young, up-and-coming, next big thing. I love using that term with him, describing it. And kudos to Brock Lesnar. So that's where the changes were. So day 1 for WWE, less changes than I thought from the actual title swings, but more about what could really be an awesome few WrestleMania, Royal Rumble type pay-per-views on the way with some awesome matches. Now for AEW. There's a clip that's going to go viral if you haven't seen it yet of poor Phoenix, man, with as our guy Nick Bagnardi compared it to the Willis McGahee injury for his arm. Ugh. Gross. So if you type AEW this week, the Phoenix injury is probably going to pop up. But Tony Khan. Oh, my God. Tony Khan. I love some of the stuff he does because he's such a wrestling fan. He loves his product. But we've said this on this podcast before. He's just got to lay off social media. He doesn't have to have everybody tell him how great he is constantly. And I know he's a billionaire's kid. And I know everyone says he's saving wrestling. He's got to turn it down. Somebody's got to tell this guy to turn it down a little bit. If you missed it, Fightful reported that Big Swole explained that the lack of diversity in structure led to her leaving AEW. Tony Khan fired back and wrote, the top 2 AEW execs are brown. Jay, Bowens, Caster, Dante, Nyla went through a list of people who all were on TV earlier this month and won. The TBS title has been very diverse. I let Swole's contract expire as they felt her wrestling wasn't good enough. Street fight tonight. What are you doing that for? What are you doing that for? To brag to everybody how good you are with diversity? To prove, oh, you said something mean about me, I'm going to throw it right back in your face. And by the way, I'm going to tell you you're not good enough to have a job. It's exactly because of you. Why? Why do you have to do that? Why do you have to have rabbit ears about everything? Now, maybe I'm a little bit more triggered and sensitive about this story because I legit went through this last year where a paper said that I got fired because of COVID, and I didn't, and I also never said that. The reporter did. And they went at me and tried to drag my reputation and all that other stuff through, just like Tony Khan tried doing to Big Swole. So maybe I'm a little bit more triggered by that story. But why does Tony Khan have to have rabbit ears? Tony, everybody constantly says how great you are. Once in a while, things are not going to go your way. Accept the criticism. Cody Rhodes went on the Barstool show there, right, with Brandon Walker, and owned up to how bad an angle he ran in May was. Owned it. Hey, that sucked. I changed everything about it. That can happen. You can step to the plate in baseball and strike out. It can happen. Tony, please, man, maybe back off a little bit on signing every single person that's ever wrestled in NXT and lay off social media, man. Like, you're good enough. You don't have to answer to everybody. And unfortunately, that's the attention it took away from the wrestlers this week, was you battling with people on social media. Time for our weekend wagers, brought to you by our friend Jared Lozier at Northeastern Insurance. 2022 is here, and maybe you want some cash betting last year. Now you got some extra cash, or you want some extra cash. Jared's going to shop the market for you to make sure he's saving you that cash for insurance costs, things that are important for you in your life, your car, your home, your business. Have you ever sat down monthly and thought, maybe I don't need to pay this price? Get a quote today. Call our guy Jared, 518-956-3753. His number again, 518-956-3753. Text him. Instead of like you up, be like, quote, Gaz podcast, question mark, and see what he sends back. Or email him that. You up, Gaz quote, and find out if you can save money for that at his email, jaredl@nemail.com. Again, jaredl@nemail.com. Hopefully you'll see Jared in the Capital Region very soon. If you come out to our live shows, Jared's there as well. Always having fun. Shout out to the Hideaway and all those great guys. Cool news with them. Shout out to Trout and Mac and Chad. All those guys doing great things. Jared loves those guys as well. Give him a call. Email him. Northeastern Insurance. Jared Lozier. He's going to help you in 2022. Picks. Georgia, money line over Bama. Said that in November that Georgia was going to lose in the SEC title game and get them back in the title game. Georgia, them dogs, are going to win the title game. So money line Georgia, and I love the NBA slate on Friday. I hope some of these games end up being better lines than they might be projected for, but here's the teams I really, really like. I like the Hawks to beat the Lakers at the Friday night 10 o'clock tip-off. I feel like the Lakers are just too old, and this is a classic game where they can make a change, and the Hawks got to get some things going if they want to compete in the East. So I like the Hawks against the Lakers. I like the Nuggets at home on a Friday night. They're dancing between the playoffs. You'd think, especially with the disrespect that the MVP just got. My guy Zach By mentioned that Jokic, not Djokovic, Jokic, was the guy who got his name mispronounced on the broadcast. Nikola Jokic. That's how you say it. Shout out to Zach By. I like the Nuggets for a little redemption game there against the Kings. So Nuggets, Hawks. Can the Timberwolves put on a show against the Thunder? The Thunder are so bad. I'm nervous about that line, though. That might be a Timberwolves money line play. You know what? Let's go all money lines just to be safe here. Let's have fun with this. Okay, no spreads. Here we go. Money lines across the board. Georgia, Atlanta, Denver, Minnesota, and Chicago. Those DeMar DeRozan threes that won back-to-back games in different years. So give me that. All right, here we go again. One more time for you. Give me the Bulls, the Timberwolves, the Nuggets, the Hawks, all on Friday, and Georgia on Monday. 5-team money line play. Hopefully you enjoyed the podcast this week. We appreciate you as always. Talk to you again soon.